reports of strange creatures in the area.
Witnesses say they couldn't believe what they were seeing.
Welcome, beloved fofers, doubters, naysayers, non-believers, and skeptics. Welcome to Paranormal, Fable, or Fact. I am Victor Trevino, joined by my co-host and beautiful wife, Tammy.
Okay. We are humble guides to tales of alleged hoaxes, unbelievable stories, and the overall strange.
Perfectly done, baby. Even though you couldn't memorize it. Okay, mention our email, pfableorfact@proton.me. We're going to try to rush through this because this is part two, so we can get to the nitty-gritty, you know. And our Facebook and YouTube links will be in the show notes. Like and subscribe our show if you like it, if you want to help us out. It's the best way to do it. Tell a friend, all that good stuff. Also, the rules will be in the show notes. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention from the Chupacabra show, baby, all the way back to the creature that we see here in America that we didn't think was a Chupacabra, that we were arguing was a different creature.
Right.
I actually, you and I both watched it together. It's a series on Prime right now. It's called Boogeyman. And there's an episode on there for the Chupacabra. And the stuffed Chupacabra that I was showing pictures of, and it's on the cover.
Yes. That
cover photo that's on the title of the show for the podcast and the YouTube channel. It's that mounted, grayish looking thing with the blue eyes. That we were watching that show, and that lady that has it stuffed, there was a local veterinarian that was arguing blue in the face, even on the show, that it was just a coyote with mange, just a coyote with mange, just a coyote with mange. So she finally let him test it. He's on camera on that episode, on that show, admitting we found no evidence of mites in its skin. It did not have mange.
Right.
Also, she sent the DNA to one of the largest databases of any animal DNA in the country, in America, UC Davis Veterinarian Genetics Laboratory. She sent a sample of the tissue to there. When they called her back, they said, "Are you sitting down?" They actually said that to her, and she said, "Yes, I'm sitting down." And they said, "We'd never seen any DNA like this. It is a cross, we believe, between a Mexican wolf and a coyote. So some type of strange hybrid," which is exactly what we were arguing, Betty, that it was some kind of strange hybrid.
Right.
It was not a Chupacabra, but it's not a normal, it's not a coyote with mange. It cannot be. The front legs are shorter than the back. It has those nodules on the butt. And we didn't know this, we heard it on the show. Most canines, I believe, have 6 to 8 nipples, I believe. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's 6.
Actually, male and female canines typically have between 8 and 10 nipples, arranged in 2 rows on their undersides.
That mounted Chupacabra, or thing that they were calling Chupacabra, it only had 2 nipples. So all kinds of oddities, all kinds of strange things, was not a coyote with mange. And I just wanted to update that show because we watched it after we had already recorded. So let's move on, shall we?
Here we go.
The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about that happened in this house, the main major thing was, like I said, I call them circular houses. There's like a main wall in the center that you could basically walk around the center, and you visit every room downstairs. Mm-hmm. As you're walking in, like I said, there was that sunken living room. There was a small hall to the right, and there was the bathroom underneath the stairs, because remember, the stairs are on the right-hand side of the house. Well, my brother and I were in the den with my mom watching TV. It had to be like a Friday night, and I'll tell you why later. She wanted cigarettes. My mom used to smoke at the time. She wanted cigarettes, so she's begging my oldest brother, Oh, go get me cigarettes, mijo. So my brother's griping about it. I don't know. He's getting up, he's grabbing his keys. Why do I got to go? You should stop smoking, blah, 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 you know. And as they're kind of bickering back and forth, I'm still watching TV. My brother says, well, why doesn't he come with me? To me. And I'm like, what? You know, my mom's like, oh, go with him, mijo. Keep him company. I'm like, what? So I get up. My brother and I are kind of bickering back and forth now because I'm like, what's up with that, man? You jerk, throw me in, under the bus like that and all this. So we're kind of bickering back and forth, and we start to go down the hallway towards the landing. And on the right-hand side there was like a built-in, I think it was built into the house. There was like these wooden pegs, and we had all of my dad hung his hats there, and we had all our jackets there. So we're pulling our jackets on. It must have been cool outside because I remember we were grabbing our jackets. As we're going up the 2 steps onto the landing from the hallway and turning left towards the front door, I hear a very distinctive sound. If anybody's ever owned a cat with carpet in the house and the cat takes off, it gets freaked out or scared or it's just trying to pounce on something, its claws catch in the carpet and makes this like sound.
Mm-hmm.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
As I turn toward the door, I'm pulling my arms up in the air because I'm pushing my arm through the jacket, putting it on, and I look to my right over the railing when I hear that sound, and something ran from under the coffee table towards the archway where the kitchen was. So kind of like it was running behind me and my brother, and both of us are turning. Again, this is fractions of time. It may be 2 to 3 seconds pushing. You're pushing it, if I would say 4, because it just ran from the table to the doorway, which is only about 15 feet maybe, but this thing was rat quick. So we only saw it for a few seconds. But the thing is we didn't have any of the lights in the front of the house on, my brother and I, because the kitchen lights were on. And there were the old fluorescent lights. Mm-hmm. With the long bars, yeah. And you basically turned on the kitchen light and it lit up all downstairs, pretty much, because those lights were so bright. So we didn't turn on, admittedly, we didn't have any lights on in the front of the room, but the front of the house, but when this thing ran, we both turned toward it. It was a foot tall. It was bipedal. Its head, the first thing I noticed was its head was way too big for its body, man. I mean, way too big for its body. And I knew it was bipedal because as it's running, my eyes are following it. And I could see its knees coming up. And its arms were pumping just like a person would run. The only way you could get a person's head to be that big is if they had some kind of like a space helmet on or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd say probably 2 to 3 times the size of a human head on this thing. Proportionately, right.
Yeah.
This is our first interjection into the recording of me and Timothy Renner on Strange Familiars. I just wanted to clarify, when I was talking about the size of the head, it just looked odd and it was misshaped. It was like a weird shaped head. So I thought maybe it was a hat or a helmet or something, right. But I don't know. We couldn't see details of it, which seemed to be a running theme in that house, is that you could see stuff, but you couldn't really see details of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no real way to describe putting too big of a head on a person, how odd it looked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this tiny little body, and then it's got this bulbous head on there. It just looked weird. Right. But anyway, back to the show.
Okay.
As it's running, another thing I noticed is it was distorting everything around it. Almost like it was in a fishbowl or something.
Huh.
But I couldn't see anything. It distorted, like, because there was a chair there and the carpet that it was running on, it was like distorting it as it ran. And my brother and I are both following this thing as it runs towards the kitchen, and for a split second, because the light was streaming in through that archway, for a split second I thought, oh, it's going to run into the light, and I can see it, right? And so I'm turned almost completely around following this thing. My mom had set a black plastic trash bag full of empty aluminum cans for my grandfather. My grandfather was retired. He's passed away now, but At the time, it was a hobby of his to collect aluminum cans, and he would go down there and turn them in and haggle with the guy, and he just liked doing it. You know, it's just something he liked to do.
That, so we had,
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we had trash bags of aluminum cans too. Yeah.
My mom was a clean freak, man. There's no way she would have left that bag sitting there unless my grandparents were visiting the next day, which is why I believe it was on a Friday night. We're talking almost 40 years ago now. You know what I mean? This was a long time ago, but I remember seeing this thing as though it was yesterday. As it's running towards the archway, it brushed against that bag. Again, the second distinctive sound that it made. Everybody knows what it sounds like when you touch an empty aluminum can bag, right?
Yeah,
full of empty aluminum cans. Makes that little tink sound, right?
Yeah.
So it went tink as it brushed against the bag and ran around the corner, disappearing into the kitchen. I turned to my brother and said, now you can't tell me you didn't see that. Because my oldest brother was the one that was telling us all, we didn't see anything, we just dreamed it all.
Gotcha.
You know, trying to be the strong one, I guess, to set the examples for his little brothers or whatever. But years later, we found out he was actually traumatized more than I was. He actually went through stuff worse than me.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, but he, at the time, I guess he just acted like nothing was going on because he wanted to be, you know, that bastion of strength for the rest of us, I guess. I don't know. I'm not an older brother, so I don't know what went on in his mind. But as I'm turning toward my brother, I said, now you can't tell me you didn't see that. He takes off running down the hall. And I realized, oh crap, this thing's running through the kitchen. It's running right towards my mom, where my mom was in the den. Because again, it's a circular house.
Yeah.
So the den was at the end of that hall. Then there was like a little kitchenette, like a little kitchenette area where there was one of the chandeliers. Then there was an island, and the kitchen was right there. The only thing that cut the den off from the kitchenette area was a carpet line. You know what I mean? It was like an open floor plan, and the carpet line ended where the tile started. And my parents had put the couch there to further separate the rooms. So basically, my mom's back was to the kitchen. As this thing's running down the archway towards her, and as quick as it was going, you know, it popped in my head, oh crap, it's running toward my mom. That's where my brother's going. So again, I was in football, man. I was young. In 2 bounds, I'm in the archway on this thing's tail, and I look, my brother's already coming around the corner of that center wall, and we're looking at each other through the kitchen and the kitchenette. He's doing the where did it go motions with his hands because my mom's watching TV. And I go, I don't know. We're looking out. We start tearing apart the kitchen, man. We're throwing open cabinets. We actually moved the refrigerator away from the wall, trying to see where this thing went, right? At first, my mom was calm. What are you boys doing, you know? And we don't answer her. We start to grab the stove to slide it, you know, away from the wall to check behind it, and my mom loses her patience because we're starting to make a mess. Like I said, my mom's a neat freak. She says, what are you boys doing? And we said, Mom, something just ran in here. She goes, what are you talking about? And we told her what we saw. This thing ran in there, and I guess as soon as it rounded the corner, the only way I can explain it is it just vanished. It just disappeared. Because where could it have gone? And my buddy's like, well, you sure it wasn't your cat? I go, doof, at the time we didn't have a cat. You don't think I'm going to know it's my cat?
Right.
You know?
Just a comment. I was explaining to Tammy while we were listening to the recording. I don't know why. Because I should be recording what I was telling her. The thing that this was so profound to me is that it was physical. You have a physical creature tearing up the carpet as it took off running, which means it has claws on its feet. And then when it brushed that bag full of empty aluminum cans, again, physical, it made a sound. It went tink. Both of us heard it as clear as day. I think even my mom heard it. And that's the thing. So it was physical, and then it just vanished.
Yeah.
You know, same thing with that night hag. It was solid on my chest. It was pressing on my throat. But then as I sat up and it hopped away from me, it just vanished right before my eyes.
Yeah.
That is crazy stuff, baby. You're talking about the ability to either slip into some other dimension or teleportation. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever the case is, it was those two that did it. That was the push. After I saw that little thing run across the living room, that's when I really started looking into this stuff. So that a couple of years down the road, after that night hag, I moved back into my parents' house, waiting for the military, and that night hag, I've had that night hag attack me. I was already interested in it. You know what I mean? That had already convinced me.
Right.
So I just wanted to interject that.
Okay.
So let's continue on.
Okay.
But that was the other one. And that absolutely convinced me that there are things going on around us that science, medicine, and academia can explain. Not even religion can explain it, because religion doesn't really talk about this stuff. I don't know what that thing was.
Your brother
later in years,
you agreed on how it looked and moved and so forth.
Absolutely, 100%. In fact, just last year, because again, we started our own little podcast, and I had told my stories on the show. I wanted to show my wife, because I hadn't talked about this for about 10 years with my oldest brother. It had been at least 10 years since we talked about it. So I wrote down exactly what I saw and what I remember, and I showed his daughter and my niece and my wife, and I had them hold on to the piece of paper what I wrote down. So I asked my brother, he was on his feet because we were watching football, whatever. I asked my brother what we saw that night, and almost word for word what I had written down, he related.
Wow.
Described exactly what I saw.
So he saw the distortion too?
Saw the distortion. He saw the bulbous head, everything. I mean, we were right there, man. When I turned toward the door, there was a couch against that little raised floor, like a half wall there. When you're in the living room, it's like a little half wall there, but it's the landing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
My mom had a couch against that, and the coffee table was right in front of the couch. So when it ran out from the corner closest to us, if I would have leapt over the railing, I would have landed right on top of it. It was maybe 5 feet away, and we were looking down at it.
Wow.
The only reason we didn't get a clearer look is because, like I said, it was kind of dim in that front of the house, so we couldn't see a lot of details, but I could see that it had legs. It had to have claws on its feet, man, because of the noise it made when it ran. And then that big bulbous head, I don't know if it was wearing a helmet or I don't know, man.
Huh.
But later, I was listening to another podcast. I don't think it was yours. I think it was another one. And he called it a boggart.
Okay.
Not like the Harry Potter boggart where, it manifests into your fears, but the actual boggart, which is supposed to be they're like these little beings that live in people's houses. And the story went is his brother wanted him to sleep in his room because he kept saying the fairies were bothering him. And he's like, what? So he lays down in his brother's room. He didn't actually see what it was, but he saw because his brother slept with his door open too because he was scared at night. And the whole light was on, so it was like his night light. And he saw along that shadow that was, showing up on the wall, he could see something small run across that doorway, and he described it exactly what I'm telling you. The small little body, maybe a foot tall with a big, huge head. And I was, again, tripping out. Vindication, man. Validation of what we saw. Basically, we're not the only ones seeing this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it makes you realize, holy crap, I'm not alone. There's other people that have seen exactly the same things that we saw.
Right.
So,
wow.
Another interjection. Tammy wanted to make a comment.
Well, I have a question. So when this all started, do you think that showed up because you guys were arguing? Because you know how they say, like, stuff shows up if there's fighting or anything?
Negative energy,
yeah,
you're saying?
like negative energy.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think... I'm trying to think back. I don't think it was this... we were kind of... I don't know if I want to say it was playful that we were arguing.
Oh, you're just like bantering back and forth.
I was more annoyed
okay.
with him, and my brother was more annoyed at my mom. I don't think we were really real angry, like, oh man, I
Yeah.
hope he dies. We were really, really fighting. You know what I'm saying? Well, you know how when you fight with your siblings, I don't think it was like that.
Okay.
It was more like, I was just kind of annoyed with him because he,
Yeah.
in my opinion, threw me under the bus.
Right.
And kind of, so,
I
yeah.
also want to add that when you were describing to Timothy about the time that you wrote all the details down of the little boggart, and then we were holding the paper, football's big in this family, okay? So if Victor and his brothers are watching football, there's nobody else in that. Like, you can't interrupt them.
Yeah.
So at that time, it was very fascinating that his brother paid attention because he was really into the game. So he was paying attention. Like his attention went straight to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And that never happens. Never happens during football, you guys.
That's true.
Never.
That's true.
So that always fascinated me. Even my niece, we were just laughing because it was during football and they never interrupt football.
Yeah, my brother was like, whoosh, all of his attention was right on us.
Yeah. And
right
it
on us.
Never happens.
Yeah, that's true. Back to the show.
Yeah. And that all happened in that same house. Same exact house, man.
Your family eventually sell it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. After I left for the military, they lived there for maybe another 2 years. And then they just, what's a trip too? And this probably happened a good 15 years ago. We were in that area trick-or-treating. And my brothers and I, our kids were all little, they were like, 9, 10 at the time. We kind of looked at each other and we went, why don't we go trick-or-treating on that street? So sure enough, we wind up in front of that house and there's an older lady. I was probably in my late 30s at the time. She was probably 10 years older than me then. And she's giving the candy to the kids and she's saying, oh, you guys look so good. You guys so good. Oh, they look so good, dads. And she's talking to us. And I said, oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And I said, oh, by the way, we used to live in this house years ago. And she kind of froze and had this expression on her face, like she wanted to say something else. But then she said, oh, that's nice. And have a good night, and kind of closed her door. And it always made me wonder, did she want to say something?
Yeah.
I don't know how many people have lived there since we moved out. I don't know if it's like a revolving door.
Right. How long was your family?
I'd say probably, I was about, maybe 8 years.
Okay.
7 to 8 years, maybe, before they could get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Before they could escape.
Did they move because they felt it was haunted, or just other reasons?
I think they just, after a while, they just got used to it.
Yeah.
It only messed with my dad a few times, and it only messed with my mom a few times. It mostly bothered me and my oldest brother.
Interesting.
But at the time, I just thought it was me, because like I said, my brother was playing it off.
Right. Yes. Yeah. See, you mentioned that. You said he had been more affected than you. Did he kind of reveal that things were happening to him as well?
Yeah, later, yeah. It bothered him almost every night, man.
Really?
He would see a small shadow running around his room, and it would pull on his blankets. It would mess with his pillow. I can't even imagine.
Huh.
And he would take my little brother and carry him into his room with him, because I guess having somebody else there would leave him alone, I guess. I don't know.
Wow.
But he started doing that for years, till finally my little brother just started sleeping in the same bedroom with him.
Huh.
So he wouldn't have to get woke up in the middle of the night, my brother carrying him over there.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And I remember back then challenging my brother, well, I thought you said you want to see anything. Why do you need Richard in there? I just want company. It helps me sleep or whatever. He'd play it off. But later he said, yeah, it's because when he would take my brother in there, whatever it was would leave him alone.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm looking at your email and it said it would mimic sounds sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I was upstairs and I heard my mom making dinner. So I'm coming down the hallway. I turned the light off from the steps, but like I said, when the kitchen was lit up, the entire downstairs was lit up, man. And I could hear, my mom's in there. She's moving pots around, turning on the water, opening cabinets and stuff. I could hear the fire. I could hear stuff bubbling and everything. So I go kind of walking over there and I come around the corner of the archway And I'm like, hey, Mom, what's for dinner? And mid-sentence, the lights go off.
Ooh.
There's nobody in the kitchen. Kitchen's perfectly clean. Everything put away like my mom left it. All the lights downstairs, because only the kitchen light was on. I was in complete darkness. Turn on the light. I'm looking around. My mom wasn't even home.
Huh.
It perfectly mimicked the sounds of my mom in the kitchen. And the thing is, years later, I talked to my brothers and they said it happened to them too. Same exact thing.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just a trip, man.
Yeah. It's a weird house.
Kind of surprised how many interjections we're doing on this, but it's just because, mostly because Tammy had comments. So go ahead, baby.
Well, I have questions because like when you and your brothers and your dad used to say you hear noises and it sounded like somebody was in the kitchen cooking, did you also like smell smells like cooking smells, or was it just the sounds?
To be honest with you, I can't I don't think I smelled anything.
Okay.
I think it was mostly the noises. I think I was just going to come downstairs to watch TV or something,
Right.
after doing my homework or whatever I was doing in my room.
Right.
And I could hear, the sounds, and that's what...
Because I always wondered, because you guys said that it mimics sounds, did you ever have like that type of like smells, like any smells from these entities or whatever they were?
Yeah,
okay,
I don't think it was just smells. I think it was mostly just the noise mimicry, because it also, just to add in there, we had talked to my parents just recently after I recorded it with Tim, and it happened to my dad several times. I didn't know that he thought my mom was downstairs. He comes downstairs, blah, 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 and just talking to her, and there's nobody in the kitchen. He's like, what?
Yeah, what happened? Yeah.
So I thought it just happened to me and my brothers, but no, it actually happened to my father too, so that was kind of trippy.
All right.
Let's get back to the show.
Okay.
I kind of have another story I wanted to talk to you about, because you fascinate me with the way you look at Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I was driving a truck. I don't want to go too much into detail because I don't know how much time we have left.
Go for it. If it's Bigfoot, we'll make extra time. Go for it.
I had a delivery going from Spokane, Washington to Boise, Idaho. When I went into Spokane to pick up my trailer, my load, all the security guards there were kind of complaining because they had freak weather. Like, I guess a snowstorm had blown in unseasonably,
Mm-hmm.
caught everybody off guard. I'm from Southern California, man. I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, and they're all bundled up, and it was freezing outside, man. I mean, it was in the 30s at least. As I'm hooking up my trailer, I'm like, crap, I should have brought some warm clothes, but I didn't know it had to be like summertime, like maybe September.
Wow.
Maybe, when it should start cooling off, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking about icy conditions, man. So I get my trailer and I'm trucking off towards Boise. Well, and I probably should have looked up the highway name. But anyway, it's a highway that runs along the southern part of Washington. It goes through Walla Walla. I don't know what highway it was. But anyway,
That's right.
I don't know what it's like now, because we're talking 20 plus years ago. But man, I was out in the middle of nowhere. I was driving on that road for hours, and I only saw a few oncoming cars.
Mm-hmm.
No street lights, no turnoffs, and I'm just trucking. It starts to sleet on me. Not a big deal. I keep going. Well, the road starts to get a little slushy, right? I think it was like on a Friday I picked up the load, so I didn't have to be in Boise until Monday. So I was going to have plenty of time. I already knew I was going to be able to relax and, go have a shower and get a hot meal and all that good stuff,
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, why fight it? Why chain up? Why do anything? I'm just going to find a pullout and pull over and just take it easy, So that's exactly what I did. Now, the turnout where I parked my truck, because I had a full tractor trailer, 53-foot, trailer, everything, got my four-ways on. Those are emergency lights for four-wheelers. Had my four-ways on. There was a berm there that had been pushed up by the snowplows. Like I said, there was a freak snowstorm.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a berm sitting there, maybe 6 feet high, that my truck was kind of against, working on my logbook. At the time, because I know now the logbooks are all electric, they're all computerized now.
Mm-hmm.
Back then we used to keep paper logbooks. So you always had multiple logbooks to make sure that you had enough hours to drive. Other truck drivers will know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, I'm working on my logbook. And at my 1 o'clock, I noticed movement through the trees coming downhill towards my truck. There was just on the outskirts of where my headlights were shining, you know what I mean? Lighting up those trees back there.
Mm-hmm.
And I look up and I see this guy bebopping along. It looked like a really big guy in a really thick fur coat, just strolling down this hill, moving. I glanced up at him and I thought to myself, that guy's out of his mind. You know, because it was like 2 degrees outside by this point. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. The sleet's coming down sideways practically, you know, because the wind is so high. So with wind chill, it had to be in the negatives, man. And this guy's out in that weather. So, you know, that's all I did is I kind of glanced up at him going, man, that guy's crazy, you know, because I figured if he needed help, my truck was lit up like a Christmas tree, man. Mm-hmm. There's no way he didn't hear my tractor because the engine was running. Of course, I needed the heater going, you know.
Right.
All my headlights were on, my four-ways are on. I know he saw me, but he was just walking parallel to my truck like I wasn't even there. But something caught my attention. Something drew my attention to it. And it wasn't until years later that I realized what it was. And I'll reveal that as I go on with my story. I go back to my logbook, and that's what stuck in my craw. I'm like, what? There's something off about this. So I got up from my driver's seat and went over to the passenger side of my tractor, and I'm looking through the window at this thing. For some reason, I was focused on the face. To me, it looked like I said, a big fur coat with a hood pulled over, and he had it cinched tight, so tight around his face that only his nose and his eyes were shown. Everything else looked fuzzy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The other thing that caught my attention was every time he swung his arms, what I thought at the time from his wrist to his elbow were tassels. You know what I mean? Now, in retrospect, it was probably hair.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's almost impossible for me now to say that it was a big guy in a fur coat, man. I can't definitively say I saw a Sasquatch,
sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who else would be out there, and I'll go into that a little more here. As he swung his arms, I could just see the water just cascading off of these tassels.
Huh.
He was absolutely drenched in this weather, man. And I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't wearing a backpack. He didn't have a belt, wasn't carrying anything, didn't have a rifle or an axe or nothing. He's just walking along these trees, and he stood out against the trees because, like I said, the sleet, this kind of a light, slushy snow, was clinging to the trees. So as he's walking in front of these trees, he stuck out like a sore thumb, man. But the only time I could see him, and I should have said this at the beginning, I have to apologize. The reason I mentioned that berm is because there was a shadow line there for my truck. The only time those trees beyond the berm where this guy was walking were lit up is when the hazard light went on. Because it was high up on the aerodynamic wings, right where my sleeper was. Uh-huh. It was sitting high up, so I was only getting glimpses of him every time that hazard light shined. And when the hazard light went off, it was pitch black over there. I couldn't see anything.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I'm kind of getting like these little glimpses of him. That's why I couldn't get a really good look at it. And as he's walking parallel to my truck, there was a descent there. It was kind of going, he was slowly descending beyond that shadow line of the berm. And when I had slid over to the pasture side, he was already just below the waist of his body. I couldn't see, only the upper part of it, because, you know, that shadow line. And as he descended, it got in my head that, oh crap, what if I'm looking at a Bigfoot? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
What if that's what it was? And I'm kicking myself because I didn't look at the feet. Because when he first started walking downhill toward me, I could see its entire body. But I just glanced up and said, wow, that guy's out of his mind, and went back to my logbook. By the time I really started paying attention, his whole lower body, then I thought, well, why didn't I look for ears? Why didn't I look at his hands? My focus was on the face and those tassels, right? Completely distracted. I'm kicking myself. So I get this great idea in my head. Why don't I throw on some clothes, the thickest, warmest clothes I have, hop the berm, run down to where this thing was walking, and check the tracks, right? Brilliant. I see boot tracks. I know exactly what it was.
Right.
If not, now we have an issue, right? So I'm bundling up, man. I'm grabbing my flashlight, everything. I'm getting ready. And I open the passenger door, and that cold hit me, man. I'm telling you. Again, all I had was jeans. I didn't have any warm clothing. I had I think I had a windbreaker, and I threw on a sweatshirt. That wind hit me, man. I was just like, oh my God, it's freezing. And then it's like that, because it was sleeting and the wind was blowing so hard, it was like a mist was like hitting you, this freezing mist from the sleet, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there going, and then I looked down next to my tractor, and I didn't realize the turnout that I was in was like a washout. It was where all the water drained. So there's like a foot of water running past my tractor with chunks of ice floating in it. I'm like, holy crap, I'm going to get I'm in tennis shoes, you know?
Yeah.
My feet are going to get wet. Then I'm looking at the berm, and it wasn't snow. It had already been there for a couple of days, so it had melted down. So it was like ice and mud and rocks and sticks and leaves, and it was just filthy, and it was jagged looking. And I'm like, holy crap, how am I going to get over that? I'm starting to second guess my brilliant idea, right? In the doorway of my passenger side of my tractor, I'm sitting there when it hit me. And when I say it hit me, it's hard to describe. It was almost like I got punched in the chest. And I actually gasped aloud. And I'm looking around like, what's going on? It was like this instant sense of doom. Like my life was in jeopardy. I only had that feeling one other time in my life when I was younger than that. My buddies and I were in a warehouse, and he worked there, and the cops didn't know that. So when they came in, the cop was aiming his .45 right at me and said, "Police, get on the ground." And I said, "Yes, sir." But for that split instance of realizing he's aiming a loaded weapon at me, that's how I felt. Like, almost like you see your life flash before your eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just for a split second, it was that same feeling like, oh my God, something's going to kill me. And for some reason, I'm looking up in the air, because that's the sense I had, like something was going to swoop down and snatch me out of my tractor.
Yeah, I understand that sense of doom, because I've had a gun pulled on me, and it's not fun. But my question to you was that when you had that sense of doom, like that sense, you didn't see him, you just felt it, right?
I was...
Because he was already gone.
He was already
right?
gone,
Yeah.
right. He had passed below that shadow line.
Oh, okay.
From the berm, and this was several minutes later, because I went in my sleeper, and I was like grabbing out clothes because it was so cold out.
Right.
I was wearing t-shirts and a t-shirt, and I think I was wearing shorts.
Yeah.
So I had my heater blasted, and I was
Yeah.
still kind of chilly. I think I had thrown on, like I said, a sweatshirt to try to warm up a little bit. So I pulled on pants right over my shorts. I think I had sweats, to tell you the truth. And I pulled on I think I had like a hat or something. I threw my hat on, and then I threw on a couple of other shirts, and I was trying to bundle up so that I could.
It was a few minutes.
When I threw open the door, that cold hit me, and so several minutes had gone by. And when I looked, I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at the water. I'm looking at the berm, and then when I looked up at the dark trees, because that's all I could see back there at that point, that's when it hit me. It takes a lot to scare me. You jump scare me, I'm going to go, ugh, just like everybody else. But I'm talking about like once, as they say, the stuff hits the fan, I don't panic. You know what I mean? I don't. Yeah. Well, you've seen me.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the paranormal, baby, I'm not a hero.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not. I was like, nope. As soon as I felt that threat to my life,
You were like, yes, sir, and closed the door.
I was like, yeah, that's it. I'm done. Not me. And I just closed the door, locked it, took off all that extra clothing, laid down, and that was that.
All right.
I'm looking around like freaking out. And I look back towards those dark trees, and I realized that thing was still there.
Oh.
It was waiting for me to get out of my tractor.
Wow.
So nope, not me, man. I'm not a hero. I closed the door, locked it, took off all that extra clothing, closed my curtains on my sleeper, and I laid down, started watching TV. And no, I wasn't going to mess with it. Not going to mess with it, man. So the next morning, bright and sunny, beautiful weather, probably 7 o'clock in the morning. You know, when I woke up, I opened up my curtains, I look out there. And this is why it's difficult for me to say that it was a person, because where it was walking, I thought it was walking down a path. Again, it was a washout. It was where all the water was draining. So where it was walking down the hill, it was nothing but rocks. You know, with mud and stuff all over them, because, you know, I guess the water had risen while it was sleeting and raining and stuff, and now it was kind of trickling through there. But you could see where all the overflow had covered the rocks with mud and sediment, you know? It was walking right downhill on those rocks, man. Bebopping along like nothing. Whereas you and I would have to, like, carefully, you know, hop from one rock to another so that we don't break our neck.
Plus, they're going to be slippery as hell.
Yes, slippery as everything, yeah. And he was walking like I thought it was a trail he was on.
Huh.
But there was no trail there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, what were you going to say?
No, I'm just sort of stunned. I mean, this is... Any number of Bigfoot accounts are very, very similar. I'm not going to say that's what you saw, but, you know, it just has all the hallmarks of, you know, these other Bigfoot accounts. How close would you say it was?
40 feet? 35 to 40 feet.
That's pretty damn close.
Yeah, but again, I could only see it every time that hazard light came on, because I've had people ask me, well, what color was the fur? I have no idea, because it was a yellow. It was dark fur, I know that. I wouldn't say black. I don't think it was black. It wasn't dark enough to be black. I would say either a dark gray, a dark brown, or a dark red. I don't know, you know, because it was being washed out by the yellow hazard light. I don't know how tall it was. There was no reference point to where I could say, oh, its head touched this spot right here.
Right, yeah.
You know, but it just looked like but it wasn't buff. Like some of the descriptions people say, you know, the V shape with the big shoulders and the bulging muscles and stuff. This thing was more like Patty, you know, frumpy looking. It looked like a big, tall guy in a obscenely thick fur coat. It's the only way I can describe it, man.
Wow.
But here's what got me, and I didn't realize this until years later. This is not just the fact that he was out in that temperature, not just the fact that it was moving along those rocks effortlessly, whereas a normal person, there's no way. I don't care if you're special forces, you know, I don't care if you're, you know, doomsday prepper, you know, commando, whatever. There's no way you could move across that terrain like that, man.
Rocks are slippery in the rain, much less sleet, you know.
And mud, and slush. There's just... But the thing that really, really hammered the nail in to where I just could not dismiss it as a big guy in a fur coat anymore, he wasn't carrying a light source.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't carrying a flashlight, no lantern, no headlamp, no MVGs. I was in the military. I used MVGs. I know what they look like. Nothing like that, man. And when that hazard light went off, it was pitch black over there.
Yeah.
Who do you know could do that, man?
Yeah.
And not only walking across that treacherous terrain like that, but in pitch blackness?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was that I saw, but I am leaning towards it had to be a Sasquatch or something similar.
Well, like I said, it has all the hallmarks. I mean, especially the fear kind of hitting you like that, which, the flesh and blood guys will say, oh, it's infrasound. Well, how do you know?
Oh, no, it was something beyond that, man.
How do you know what it was? But, we get that with these things, with some of these encounters. The fact that it was waiting there, too, that you didn't know, until you opened the door and you saw it's still there. That's pretty intense. I might have, for all my obsession with Sasquatch, I might have driven off and slept somewhere else.
Okay, you wanted to say something, Bebe?
Yeah, because I want to interject on this. Okay, I'm with Timothy. I would have drove away. I don't care if it was an 18-wheeler, a 22-wheeler, a 64-wheeler. After having that feel of doom, I would have said, all right, time to drive away. But you were saying like that berm could have been like almost 6 feet tall because it came up to your knees while you were in the truck, right?
Approximately, from what I remember.
Pretty tall.
It was, they had pushed up, it was where they dumped most of the snow from the highway. Right. From, the several days before that. Because like I said, it was like a freak storm that hit there.
I would have got out of there. I don't care.
But I didn't know how far I had to drive in that bad weather before I found another place to park. That's what,
You weighed on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you knew as a trucker, there's not a lot of places you can stop.
Yeah.
There's a lot of highways that are, they don't even allow trucks to drive on them. You have to.
Oh, yeah, I never thought of that.
You have to think of low bridges and stuff like this. You have to know your route. So once you picked your route, I don't know how it is now because they probably use GPS now. But back then, you didn't have GPS back then,
Yeah, you had the Thomas guide.
You had the Thomas guide. And you had to plan out your route.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where are you going? They just sent you coordinates over the Qualcomm.
Yeah, whether or no weather, you had to plan it out.
They probably don't even use Qualcomm anymore. It was just basically like a simple little computer that you had hooked up to your truck, and they were just basically text messages.
Oh, okay.
That's all it was. So they just sent you the name of the place you were going and then the address, and I had to choose all the highways.
Oh, okay.
The route of how to get there. That's how you could do your logbook because you knew where you were going to be, how many miles, it was going to take you, drive time, how much hours, all that stuff.
Right.
So, but yeah, you couldn't just park any way you wanted. It's not a car.
All right.
What else did you want to know?
That's it.
Okay, back to the show.
Well, it was a big rig, I wasn't going to just...
Yeah.
And plus, there's not a lot of places you can pull over. That turnout was huge,
Yeah,
you have to pick and choose where you park,
Right.
When you're driving tractor trailer,
Right.
So,
wow.
If I was in my car, well, that's the thing, Tim. If anybody was in a normal sized pickup or a car, they would have never saw it over that berm.
Oh, yeah.
Because the berm was there. The only reason I was able to see it is because I was up so high on my tractor.
Wow.
So that is another thing that always, struck me as that's why I didn't care that it was just walking along in the open because maybe it wasn't even sure whether I could see it or not.
Yeah.
Because again, the only reason I was able to see it is because I was up so high. If you were in a car, you would have all you would have saw was berm.
Mm-hmm.
Because the berm was, I'd say, at 5 to 6 feet at least. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's a cool encounter.
Well, I always wanted to call because your show got me turned on to Sasquatch Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to contact Wes to try to get on the show. But to me, my encounter, there isn't really anything distinct about it or definite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was kind of hesitated. You think it's actually a pretty good story?
I do. I really do. I think it's a great story. It's so you said you saw the nose. Was anything stand out about the nose or anything?
No, just that there was no fur or hair on it. It was just it like I said, it just looked like a person cinched the hood around their face.
Yeah. Well, that's so that we get a lot of these accounts like, it looked like it was wearing a hoodie until I got close to it. And then I realized, it was the peak of the head or whatever. A lot of those accounts, especially in Sasquatch Chronicles, I've heard a lot of people say, I thought it was a guy in a hoodie until I got close.
Yeah. See, I didn't start listening to this stuff until after, like I said, this was probably because I ran heavy equipment. I used to just listen to the radio, but then the radio had too many commercials,
Yeah. Yeah.
So somebody turned me on to podcasts. And at first I started listening to like sports, I was listening to sports history, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I thought, hey, I wonder if there's anybody that tells ghost stories, That's when I searched, and that's when I found your show.
Ah, cool.
And yours is the first paranormal show podcast that I listened to.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And like I said, when you were talking about Toad Road, man, I just got chills because I thought about that when I was out in the woods. Because, man, I was parked there on the side of the road working on my logbook for at least 40 minutes. And I didn't see one car go by. I mean, I'm telling you, Tim, I was out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that's the other thing. Where would this guy be coming from?
Yeah, and, I'm not saying it, there's no way it could possibly be a human, but I'm someone who likes the cold. And I like to hike in the cold. I like to hike at night. These are two
Me
things
too.
I like to do. But a cold, like sleety rain.
Wet? Right.
No, thank you. I don't
Exactly.
want any part. It's miserable. It's absolutely miserable.
It leaches the heat right out of you.
Yeah.
Even if you're bundled up, as soon as you start getting damp or wet,
Yep.
your hair or your hands oh man, forget it. Or
It's
your
just
feet.
miserable. Yeah.
It's miserable.
Yeah,
Exactly.
There's nothing fun about that. It take any joy you would have had otherwise. Yeah. And then if it is a person, like, what's he doing? He's not carrying any supplies.
He wasn't, getting wood. What are you doing out there?
Yeah.
What are you doing out there? It's like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Especially if, like, as you said, you thought he was gone, you're going to go out and look for tracks, and then he's just there waiting. Okay, so,
Yeah.
so it wasn't a dude just, okay.
I didn't see him waiting. I just realized where he had headed. Those dark trees were there, and as I looked over there,
Okay,
I got the sense he was still there.
gotcha. Okay.
It was waiting for me to get out of the truck.
Gotcha.
Or maybe that feeling of impending doom was it saying, don't get out of the truck.
Right.
You get out of the truck,
We're going to have problems.
we're going to have some problems.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
And I decided to listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't going to go.
What's the reason for, a fella to be walking, like, in those conditions, down
Exactly.
those rocks? That's just...
Exactly. It's almost impossible for me now to admit to myself that it was a person. It just couldn't have been. I don't see no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
And then how could they see in the dark?
Right.
Nobody can see in the dark like that, man.
Yeah.
So
That's really, really intense, actually. Yeah, that's a great story. What's your podcast called?
it's called Paranormal, Fable, or Fact. It's got a little colon behind it.
Okay.
Paranormal, Fable, or Fact. And we, like I said, we talk about all kinds of stuff. We just did a show on Robin Hood.
Oh, cool.
Give you an idea of how we don't just talk about ghosts and stuff. We talk about whatever's strange, whatever's. We even did a show on the Great Wall of China just because during my research, I started finding out facts about it that I had no idea.
Yeah. Oh,
And
no, and again, that was Wes who gave me the advice. And, you know, like when I started, he said, don't just do Bigfoot, Tim. He's like, there's a whole world out there. And it was the best advice I got when I started the podcast. He's like, I know you love Bigfoot, but don't limit yourself. And that was great advice because it really keeps me interested.
Yeah.
You know, if
There's
I
so much.
do a variety of stories. And that,
Yeah.
you know, I pass that advice on. It sounds like you're already doing it. You know,
Yeah.
It keeps you interested, and I think it keeps the listeners interested too.
Yeah. We just started. We're focusing more on YouTube now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting into like video editing and stuff. But if you don't mind, I've always wanted to ask you that. I would love to ask Wes the same question because it's Wes's question. He always asks his guests, what do you think Sasquatch is?
Yeah.
And I would love to hear your answer, Tim.
So right now, and I always say, allow me to change my opinion, but this is stuck with
Absolutely.
me for quite some time. I'm going to say it's some kind of nature spirit. I do not believe they're physical animals. They're too wacky.
Yeah.
There's too much weird stuff that goes with them. So, yeah, right now I feel like there's some kind of, like I said, a nature spirit or, you know, genus loci, spirit of place, something like that. What exactly, you know, I can't say. Sometimes I think they have something to do with trees. Like, you know, I don't know if you've heard the story about people saying they heard knocks and then they started listening. It seemed like the knocks were coming from inside the tree.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I never heard that one. Wow.
Yeah. And I've actually heard that. I heard knocks. It was recently. I heard knocks recently. I'm like, that sounds close. And I put my ear up against a tree and it sounded like they were coming from inside a tree.
Wow.
But
what do you...
I said this on the recent patron show, and I'll say it here. I don't even think knocks are necessarily like creatures hitting trees anymore. I think knocks are just another one of those sounds that you hear that let you know like weird stuff is
going on.
Potentially going on.
What do you think? Because we actually have a episode called "The People versus Sasquatch," where I laid out all my crazy, wild theories about what I think it is, and it's kind of going along the lines of what you're talking about. What do you think about them coming from underground?
Well, you know what?
Could the knocks be reverberating if they're underground? Could it be reverberating through the tree?
Quite possibly.
Do you see what I'm saying?
And I mean, trees, they have roots. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's definitely something to... let's put it this way. Without me saying too much, there are reasons why I asked witnesses, especially on Bigfoot investigations, but really in any investigation, about people digging in the ground or legends of buried treasure, et cetera, around that. And to my knowledge, I haven't had one person say, oh, no, there's nothing like that around here. As far as I can remember, everybody's like, oh, yeah, there's a mine down the street, or there's a quarry over here, or, there's a graveyard, across the street.
I don't know how you feel about David Paulides, but his missing 411, one of his qualifiers are rock formations in the area.
Yeah.
If these things can move rock somehow, step into a cavern underneath the rock and then set the rock back down on top, your dogs aren't going to be able to track them. Even if you have it on thermal, if it steps underground, it's going to look like it vanished.
Yeah, it could be.
It's just a theory of mine that, that maybe they live underground. And I remember, I don't know if it was your show or Wes's show, where it was like a pond, and all the kids there thought that there was rumors going around that the Sasquatch lived under the water in this pond.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the alligators wouldn't swim in that area of the pond.
It must have been Wes's show, because I remember that story. Yeah, from a while back, I think.
Yeah, and that's what got me thinking. There was also another show, and I think this was your show, where a guy said that he had been captured and was being carried by one of these things, and he said it opened up the ground.
Yeah. That was an old story. Yeah, that was from the 1800s.
Yeah, and you were telling it, right? That was you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff always made me think, well, what if, because it makes sense if they do live underground, because it would explain that age-old criticism that some of the skeptics have towards the existence of these things. Why haven't we found a body? Well, if they live underground, they die underground. See what I'm saying?
There's so much weirdness with it. I almost don't even think in terms of bodies anymore, again, because I think these things take on physical bodies for a very limited amount of time. Again, this is just a theory, but if you think about like the giant wolf at Skinwalker Ranch, and they shot it and blew a piece of it off, and they came up to it and within minutes it's rotting away. So it's almost like these things gather materials to make a physical body, and it starts dissipating from the minute it's gathered.
So you believe Sasquatch might not even be an actual physical creature, that it's taken like a physical manifestation, like a temporary physical manifestation?
Possibly. Again, wouldn't I know? But yeah, possibly. That's really...
Oh, absolutely.
That's why it smells like rotten flesh, because it's already rotting from the minute they assemble,
That is brilliant. Yeah, this is all speculation, man. Right. Nobody knows.
Yeah,
everything that I'm saying, it's just, ideas, like I said, just shots in the dark.
Right.
Just trying to make pieces of this enigma fit,
Yeah.
But that is fascinating. That is a really good theory of somehow they're forming physical form, and that's why they just vanish.
Yeah, they just They have physicality for a time.
Yeah, the tracks just stop.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've seen that.
Oh, yeah.
In other stories where, people be tracking one of these things and I just assumed, well, maybe it went underground, but
Tons
that's
of stories
also
of track stopping. We've
Yeah.
had one here in York County. I talked to the people who found the tracks, 2 miles of tracks, and they just stopped in the middle of a field.
with no explanation.
Yeah. Guy said,
Nowhere to go.
It turned around and tiptoe, walked backwards in its own tracks. I'm like, what did it tiptoe? It would ruin the tracks. There's, some animals do that and some people do that on purpose. So you can't tell which way whether they were coming or going. You ruin the tracks on purpose that way. But
Right.
this thing, they could specifically follow the tracks. It did not ruin and I said, what,
Right.
to tiptoe back? Like, come on, this thing's supposed to be a, top of the food chain predator and it's worried about tiptoeing through its track. Give me a break.
But plus you would see where it cut off, wherever it backtracked to, it would have to still cut away from its original trail, and you'd probably see that.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's in the middle of a field, that's kind of hard to hide that.
Yeah, I give the Flesh and Blood crowd a lot of guff, and I feel it's fair play, though, because they've been making fun of the other folks in this for years. And I say they build like a Rube Goldberg machine to make this stuff work, Oh, the tracks ended because the Bigfoot took a superhuman jump at the end of the trackway. Well, then you would see that in the tracks,
Right, because they would have to push away.
Yeah. You would see the pressure. But, they'll come up with these, like, wacky theories. It's like, man, you're just building more into
More
this.
woo.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're actually adding more woo by trying to deny the woo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at some point, you have to just go, this is a mystery, And speculation's fun. Like, we can sit here and bat around theories to say like, we don't know.
Yeah.
Talking about we were talking about where the tracks just end, he actually has a book titled Where the Footprints End, I believe, Tim. I've never read it, but I didn't even realize it at the time that I said that the tracks just end, because I've read that. And that's another one of these woos, about this creature.
Yeah.
People will find these tracks. And that's why it just blows holes in the idea of, putting the fake feet on and you're tromping around. Because many people have claimed that's what they've done. There's no Sasquatch. I just put some fake feet on and walked around and fooled a bunch of people. Well, how do you explain it just ending in the middle of a field?
Yeah.
And there's no tracks in the area.
Yeah.
And like Tim and I discussed, he says, well, it just jumped. And that's why the tracks ended like that. Well, there would be traces of it in the ground because in order to jump that high, maybe you have to push off.
Right.
And that would be evident in the tracks. Anybody that doesn't know anything about tracks wouldn't know that.
Right.
But anybody that does, knows that you can tell when it changes pace. You can tell when it's turning. You can tell when it's hurrying. The pace widens. The tips of the feet hit the ground and dig in deeper.
Trackers would know.
Yeah, they dig out the dirt when you're running, because when you run, you because you're kicking up dirt, because you're pulling, you're getting traction.
Yeah.
You can tell the difference when something, and if something had jumped, you would be able to tell.
Right.
In the track, and that's what we're talking about. I just thought that was fascinating. I wasn't. Because at the time, now that I'm listening to it back, I'm like, oh, it sounds like I'm kind of kissing butt. But no, that's not why. I had completely forgot
About
Tim
his
had
book.
a book
Yeah.
called that,
Yeah.
Where the Footprints End.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was fascinating. But anyway, let's get back to the show.
Well, that's the thing about the Flesh and Blood crowd is they're so staunch in their stance. There's no room. There's no give.
Right.
And I was telling my wife when we were talking about it, I kind of understand that, because to them, if you start to deviate from it being like a bear or a raccoon, you're muddying the waters.
Right.
In their minds, you're ruining their chances of science finally recognizing these things.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And
I,
that's why they're so defensive.
I'm sympathetic to that, but I always go back to, what do we have? What do we have? We have a bunch of DNA evidence, which has all come back inconclusive. Every single bit, every single time.
Every single, yep.
Hair, inconclusive. Every time. It's tested once, unknown primate. Oh, that's interesting. They tested again. Oh, no, that's people. Or, oh, no, that's a bear. Every bit, inconclusive. We have some great tracks. really great tracks.
Plaster casts, yeah.
Tracks that people, experts look at them and say, oh yeah, no, something left this track for sure. Okay, so we have great tracks. That's the best evidence we have. And I just go back to, in the 1950s, how did they hunt ghosts? They'd throw baby powder on the floor and they wait for tracks to appear. We're doing the same thing in the woods with mud. That's all we're doing. We're waiting for tracks to appear. And yeah, they're great, but that's the best evidence we have, is just these tracks. And
it has to be something beyond. It can't be a natural. They can't be.
That's my belief. It's like there's something more. They're very weird. And the other thing that puts a hole in the we're going to be very scientific about this is witness testimony. Science hates witness testimony. They absolutely hate it because witnesses are unreliable. My point is, well, let's go with, yes, witnesses are unreliable, but if you go back to these old reports I've collected from newspapers from, the early 1800s on, and these modern accounts that are appearing on Sasquatch Chronicles and the other places, and these are people separated by hundreds of years, and until I started digging these reports out, honestly, people weren't reading these. Like, nobody was going back to look through these old newspaper archives to see how they should talk about their Bigfoot encounter. Give me a break. It just wasn't happening. They're talking about the same things. These creatures are acting the same. They don't like dogs. They seem to know what guns are. They climb on people's roofs. Very weird thing. Very weird thing. People talking, oh yeah, they climbed up on my roof. That's an odd thing. So you have this sort of pattern of behavior over hundreds of years, and hundreds, if not thousands, of different witnesses are reporting this behavior. Witnesses who had, at least pre-internet, no way of knowing what other people were saying about this stuff.
Just consistent.
Yeah.
Throughout the years.
So that's what we have.
How do you just broom that away and say, no, there's nothing to that?
Yeah, no, there's got to be.
How can you deny that?
Right. I am sympathetic to the idea that, like, no, this is something real and we need to prove this is real, and let's prove it like it's an animal. I am sympathetic to that. But, they've had over 50 years, and they keep going back to the same stories, the same trackways, the same evidence. And it's just like, come on, guys. Like,
there's something about this thing that is not natural.
Yeah.
We were talking about all the accounts from long ago. What Tim's saying is that he had to dig deep to find these archives, because he does a lot of research on this, on Sasquatch, baby. And to find things from hundreds of years ago that match today. What he's saying is you can't just flip your computer on, read those old accounts to tell your story today and have it match. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I totally see what you're saying.
So it's consistent. And also another thing, and I didn't bring this up, I should have. You also have to take into account the Native Americans and the First Nations people. Their stories are dated hundreds of years back that match what people are saying today. There's still evidence of what they were talking about way back then.
Well, yeah.
And the Native Americans and the First Nations people aren't just out there just laying it all out, what they believe. You have to actually search for this stuff, or find someone from those tribes willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
Or somebody from the tribe writes a book or whatever, something like that, in order for you to know what they believe.
Yeah. Well, I know that if he's saying that he's going through the newspaper archives, those newspaper archives, because I use it for genealogy all the time, the language is different, the description's different. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta put yourself in that time frame,
right?
And it's very tedious to look that stuff up.
He mentioned the internet age, pre-internet, because now if you really, really wanted to, you could find some stuff out. But again, you'd have to do a deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be there at the tip of your fingers, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to comment that because I thought that was fascinating. But anyway, let's get back to the show.
Okay.
What do you think of this? This is another one of my crazy theories, and I'm just going to throw it out there because I know the way your mind thinks, and I think you're going to probably maybe even get tripped out by it. But there's a archetypal scenario I'll call it the hiker scenario. And it's same stories, multiple people this happens to. They're walking along, sometimes a well-known, well-traveled trail. just hiking, minding their own business. Something starts to growl at them. Something starts to throw rocks at them. Something starts to pace them. And, they get turned around. By the time they get back to safety, they're absolutely petrified, these people.
Mm-hmm.
Even in Wes's encounter, he said the largest one was kind of doing this like sprinter stance, like it was going to charge their vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And him and his brother were just absolutely mindless with fear, because Wes is like, oh my God, please don't charge the car. Please don't charge the car. Wes said something, and I hesitate to talk about his encounter without his permission, but it highlights what my theory is. So I kind of have to. Wes said something along the lines of, it was though it was trying to intimidate us, and it was doing a really good job at it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, when it, like you just said, climbing up on people's roofs, there's also those reports of them slapping on the side of people's houses.
Yeah.
Hard,
Mm-hmm.
jiggling the doorknobs, peeking in the windows. What do you think about them having the capability of feeding on people's fear?
It's very possible. I think, and it's not just them, it's across the board with the other. I think it might not be just fear. It might just be some kind of reaction. It seems to want interchange. Let's take your encounter. It almost like it wants to be seen in a way.
Right. Because that's the other criticism. They'll say,
have to be. Right. It could have stayed out of sight.
Yeah, it could have just hidden the trees or went around.
Yeah, exactly.
Where my truck was.
Yeah. So is it looking for a reaction? Is it looking to just be noticed? Like, hey, I'm here,
yeah, here I am.
Yeah, notice me. Or what does it want? Does it want that fear reaction? Does it want, some kind of something from us? Yeah, I often think that. I don't know that it's just fear all the time, but I think it wants something.
Just feeding on our reaction to the unknown. Yeah, because it's not just fear you feel, it's also awe and curiosity and confusion.
Right. And I think
very strong emotions.
When I went back to Hex Hollow after the raccoon attack it was like the first or second, I think it was the second hike I ever did alone there, since, I took a break from that area because I really felt like it was not good what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm going through and blah, blah, blah. And I hear some knocks, and I kind of don't want to go back towards where I heard the knocks. So I head the other way, and there's a dead cat laying just right in the middle of the trail. Like it had just fallen over. No coyote, no predator marks on it. It looked like it just keeled over in the trail. And I took that as a really dark thing. And it really upset me. And the first person I talked to was Brother Richard about it. And he said, wait a minute. Sometimes, the other doesn't understand. And it doesn't sort of use the same language we do. And don't necessarily think of it as a negative thing. Think of it as like, almost like, hey, you're back. Let's start playing again. But it just doesn't understand that humans would like be very disturbed by that. Like a cat leaving a dead gopher or something by your front door. Especially because of how many skulls I collected over the years, And it's like, it doesn't understand. Well, it's like the thing that got me in trouble is like I asked for a skull. 10 minutes later, I find this newly decapitated groundhog, and I realize like, oh, he gave me a skull, but it's just gory. I don't like gore, I don't like I'm just I don't like that. I want a nice clean, sun bleached skull. And then it stunned me, and I didn't take it. And again, rules of folklore that like going back thousands of years say, A, don't ask for things, but B, if you do and it's given to you, for God's sake, you better take it, because it's a big offense if you don't. And I really do feel like that led to everything that came after with the raccoon and all that. But
it happened to you on
it's like
Toad Road, didn't it?
It's like it just like it heard skull. It's like, okay, here's a skull. Not understanding. Like, oh no, I didn't want it covered in gore. They
want bits of skin hanging off of it, and it's such a trip, man.
Yeah,
see, I've always wanted to come on your show because if I had a chance to pick your brain, I just really wanted to take the opportunity because it's. Well, you've been through a lot, man. You.
I'm certainly willing to come on yours. Just let me know when, and we can set up a time. I'll hop on our show, and you can quiz me all night.
Oh, that would be awesome, dude.
Victor, give the name of your podcast again, and where can people find it?
It's Paranormal, Fable, or Fact We're on YouTube mostly, but we're on all the major Spotify. I don't know if we're on Apple. For some reason, it won't let me make an account on there, but
Yeah,
we're on iHeart.
a
We're
little
on,
wacky. The whole Apple thing's it's a little harder to navigate. Yeah.
the only one, and it's one of the biggest ones, and we can't get our podcast on there. But yeah, we are pretty much on all the other major Spotify, iHeartRadio, all that kind of stuff.
And is your YouTube channel the same name as the podcast?
Yeah, it's at Paranormal, Fable, or Fact.
All right. Then send me those links. I'll put them in the show notes for everybody.
Oh, cool, man. Appreciate you.
Victor, thanks so much for sharing your stories.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
So that about wraps it up, baby.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to interject one more time. I really like how Timothy said, well, right now, and then he explained what he was, feeling or thinking or his theory. I like that because what I've discovered as we started doing this podcast is that I'll listen to previous episodes and I'll change my mind on my conclusion. And Absolutely. I'll change my mind on a lot of stuff. But I also have become a fan of Strange Familiars, and I've also gone and dipped into Wes's show, which is
Sasquatch
Chronicles. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I do want to say thank you again, Timothy Renner, for interviewing Victor. It was 2 great shows. It was awesome to listen to.
Yeah, definitely. Really appreciated going on the show. Love talking to him. We're definitely going to try to get him back on so that I can pick his brain, man. I want to throw a bunch of... It's like throwing stuff and seeing what sticks,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like that his conclusion towards Sasquatch is very similar to what, we concluded on our show, People versus Sasquatch, because I just don't think it's a natural creature, baby. And I didn't say that during the interview that I told him I think it's delusional that, and not to offend anybody, but I do, baby. I think it's delusional for this flesh and blood crowd, which is the majority of the Sasquatch, researchers, that they think it's a natural creature. There's too much weirdness, baby. There's too much woo to completely ignore if you think that science is going to say, oh, yeah, let's look into that. Because, again, just like we asked on that show, what are they waiting for?
Yeah.
And Tim asked a similar question. What do we have?
Yeah.
What do you have after all these years of research in this thing? You have tracks, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I mean, what other signs do you need that it's not natural? You know what I mean? So I thought that was fascinating. I like that our interaction that we had there, our banter, you'll say. But that pretty much does it, baby, so...
Yeah, that pretty much does it. Once again, like always, thank you for listening. Go on the YouTube channel, the podcast, like, subscribe.
All that good stuff.
All that good stuff. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.